Welcome to the Anxiety and Free Podcast. I'm your host, Marquita Myrick, and I'm so excited to start this podcast and community. I'm briefly going to tell you who I am. I am a licensed psychotherapist. I am approaching 15 years of practice. I am a wife, a mother of two beautiful children, and most importantly to me, I'm a woman of God. You'll definitely be hearing about faith on this podcast, but that's enough about me. I want to tell you why I'm starting this podcast. This podcast is birthed from some personal changes that I'm going through. I have been doing online marketing specifically for about 5 years now, and I have grown in so many ways, y'all. I have learned more about myself and who I am, who I really want to be, what's my purpose, and that has birthed this podcast. So, the mission of this podcast, honestly, is simple. It's to empower people to try therapy. You can remember that, right? When you're trying to share it with friends and they say, girl, what's the Anxiety and Free podcast about? You'll just say, she's just trying to empower people to try therapy. So I want to use this first episode as an introduction to the podcast. I'm explaining really what you're going to be able to expect from me. The three segments that I'm going to focus on are monologue. We're going to focus on expert interviews and then also interviews of people who have either never been to therapy, this part is very important, or people who have been to therapy and they had a subpar experience. I am really interested in hearing those stories. So if that is you, you'll hear a little bit more at the end of this episode about what that entails. And you will also be able to sign up to be on the podcast and be interviewed by myself. And I promise I will be so gentle with you. In my years of practice, I have been described as very down to earth and gentle. So these segments will not be to mock anyone or make anyone feel bad for never trying therapy, or certainly not to make anyone feel bad because they've tried it and it didn't work for them, because there are so many experiences people can have. It's really just to provide more of a platform for people who've had these experiences and they can actually be interviewed by someone versus making some one-off videos that people share and comment negatively under. So those are the three things we're going to focus on. Some of the topics you can expect are, of course, mental health. This podcast is all about mental health, surviving mental illness, coping skills. We're going to be talking about faith. We're also going to talk about finances. We're also going to talk about eating habits. We're going to talk about relationships. Anything you can think of most likely has a mental health element to it. And that is so important for me to discuss as I have entered my 40s and have really looked back and identified some things I could have done better at different parts of life. And I also see threads of mental health and mental illness in those things that I would go back and tweak. And so I want you and everyone else listening to have a safe space to chat about those things, about how our mental health impacts all the things in life, right? And so I want to share a little more too about what's birthed this podcast and this change that I'm experiencing, because I do think a lot of people are coming to a point in life where they're changing. And sometimes we lean into that change and it takes us off the path of our purpose. And we certainly have that option. I could certainly say, I don't want to do marketing anymore online. I don't want to do that. I want to just do it in person. That's not me though. I want to go where the people are. I want to reach more people. So I am experiencing a shift in how I view what marketing needs to look like. And certainly I have a 7 and a 9-year old. Oh, if you have kids in the second and fourth grade or around those elementary ages, you know it is a challenge to support them, right? And so showing up and doing a whole bunch of one-off videos, that's not my ministry anymore. That is no longer my ministry. I can no longer show up that way. So I really kind of went back and forth with God and I thought, how can I show up in a way that's authentic, in a way that connects me with my overall purpose? How can I leave legacy? Because all of those existential questions come up too as you reach certain ages. And I really started thinking, and God rather put it on my heart, that I needed to start a podcast. And this would be a better way for me to have a creative outlet for my work and my personal life. This really is going to be a space where I'm more honest too, because as a psychotherapist, these sessions are all about my clients. I share tidbits of myself, of course, right, as I'm relating to people and connecting. However, even online, on all of the platforms that I've used over the last 5 or 6 years, I haven't fully talked like this. And so I thought having a podcast would give me a space to do that, to really connect with the people on a personal level and share this is who I am behind the mask of psychotherapy. So I'm really excited about that. I really just needed a new creative outlet. And that's how this podcast was birthed. This podcast actually is connected to a course that I have, Anxiety and Free. And I'm not currently offering the course. I just want to be clear about that. What I do want to say, though, is that that course and this podcast was also birthed from this idea that we can have anxiety. We can have mental health challenges. We can have mental illness in our history or in our present day life, and we can still live a life of freedom. I'm a big proponent of that. A lot of people think that once they get a diagnosis of a particular thing, that their life is over. You know, they got to take medication for the rest of their life and they're just done. And I am living proof that you can have anxiety, you can have OCD, you can have schizophrenia, you can have depression, bipolar disorder, and you can still live a life where you find freedom in everyday experiences. And so that's going to be a theme that comes up in this podcast. You can have a life of freedom. And I want to empower you to try therapy if you haven't, because therapy can help you really map out what that freedom looks like for you. And I look forward to hearing more of people's life experiences and how they define freedom and how they're crafting it for themselves as well. So I'm going to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about that segment where I interview people who have either gone to therapy before and didn't have a positive experience, or people who have just never been to therapy. We all know those people who say, oh, I would never do therapy, right? And so that segment is going to be called, Can I Convince You to Try Therapy? Now, that's the question at the end. More so, what we're digging into is I want to hear the stories. Tell me the last time you tried therapy, what was that experience like for you? If it was positive, what was positive about it? If it was negative, what was negative about it? If it was neutral, if you just feel like it was okay, I vented, but I didn't get anything out of it, I want to hear about that too. Because who am I expecting to listen to this podcast? Yes, I want the general public to tune in. I want you to share. I also want for other healthcare professionals to listen to these podcast episodes and listen to the voice of the people who oftentimes are in these therapy sessions, not really giving us direct feedback, especially if we don't ask for it as psychotherapists. I make it a point to ask people directly, how was this session for you? You know, I'm looking to survey them because I don't send out a survey. You know, I really respect people's privacy. So at the end of those sessions, not every single one, okay, maybe like every 3 to 5 sessions, especially in the beginning when I'm getting to know people, I need that feedback so that I can know what to do more of and what to do less of. My whole point, though, is that a lot of therapists, my understanding is that they aren't asking for that feedback, and then clients don't feel comfortable giving it. What is the number one reason for that? What do y'all think? They don't want to hurt the therapist's feelings. I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so I just couldn't give that feedback. So I just stopped going to therapy. I actually hear that a lot. Or I've also heard over the years people say, well, my therapist and I, we became friends. And so it became very hard to give that feedback in a friendship. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that sounds unethical, well, you're right. It is very unethical for you to become friends with your therapist and vice versa. And those are the kind of ethical boundary crosses that create that barrier, and people then don't feel comfortable speaking up. No, it's not always to that extreme. Certainly, some people will say, you know, I'm just more introverted, or I avoid conflict. That's why I'm in therapy, right? I can't give that feedback to my therapist. Those people exist as well. The point of this Can I Convince You to Try Therapy segment is not to bash the therapist or bash the client or the former client in this case, or the person who's never been to therapy. The point is for us to hear these stories and extract what the lesson is so that we can make different choices in the future. If it's a psychotherapist listening, you know, maybe the choice is I need to ask for this feedback more often, or I need to make sure we're not blurring those lines of friendship and psychotherapist. And maybe for the person who's entered the segment and has been so vulnerable with me in these interviews and says, I've never been to therapy. Hopefully, the goal is to provide a safe enough space to talk about their experiences in and outside of therapy, and I can help encourage them to give therapy another try. Now, if anyone tells me no, Marquita, this did not work. This thing you're doing, right? This little mini experiment you're doing with the Anxiety and Free podcast, it's not working, and I'm still not going to therapy, girl. That is okay. I will absolutely respect that, because at the end of the day, someone's still going to listen to that episode and learn something from it. And it's possible that people who say no on the podcast still end up going to therapy, right? Giving it a try at some point in life. So I wanted to dive into that one a little more because I think it gives you more of a vision for where I'm going. The other ones are kind of self-explanatory. This is the monologue style episode you will get. You will get Marquita sharing unfiltered about a topic that surrounds mental health, mental illness, empowering and motivating you to consider something in your life. And I always try to be very careful with my language. I want to encourage you to consider because we're adults here. This is an 18 and up podcast. I don't want to tell you what to do. You've lived this life. You are the expert in your life. I'm only encouraging, I'm motivating, I'm encouraging you to consider something new. Consider that therapy could help you. So those are our topics. Monologue style, you got that down. And then the segment on can I convince you to go to therapy? I think that one I broke down in a good way. The expert interviews, I already have some people lined up. I'm so excited. This is season 1. I'm so excited about the people that are going to be speaking. We're going to be talking about finances. We're going to be talking about eating habits and intuitive eating. I'll be asking one of our registered dietitian guests about intuitive eating. I myself am seeing a dietitian and it has really been so helpful for me. And submitting myself to that process, there was such a mental health component. So I'm learning a lot and I want to bring that expert in to speak to you about that. And I also want to encourage you to consider using the Anxiety and Free podcast as your mental health BFF, okay? You're going to come and learn, you're going to grow. Eventually we'll have a different community online where you can connect outside of the podcast. So there's that. Get ready because season 1 is starting out with a bang, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about our sponsor. FindMyTherapist.us, that's the actual website, is our sponsor for this podcast. And Find My Therapist is an online private pay mental health provider directory. The providers on the Find My Therapist directory may or may not accept insurance. However, Find My Therapist was created for providers and clientele who say, I want nothing to do with health insurance. I want, at least for my mental health, I want the insurance company out of my mental health care. I want some control over this. I don't want someone telling me how much therapy I can receive or what types. Those providers on the directory are ready to give you an individualized approach to mental health care because they can. I myself am a private pay provider. I do not accept health insurance. And, it comes with some scrutiny on and offline because we have to delve into the topic of accessibility. I won't do that now. I will do that in a later episode, maybe this season, maybe in an upcoming season. However, there is value on both sides. There's value in you seeing someone who accepts your insurance, and there's value in you seeing someone who doesn't accept insurance and has a more private pay model and potentially has access to other resources that you could use to reduce your out-of-pocket costs for therapy. So we'll do a separate episode on that one. However, I just really wanted to introduce our sponsor, which is findmytherapist.us. Go check it out. Find a therapy provider for yourself today. Now, here's your CTA, your call to action for anyone who is not familiar with that terminology. Like, share, and subscribe. I will have audio versions of this podcast wherever you stream your podcast, and then you will also see the video version on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe. Just as the mission of this podcast is simple, I want to empower you to try therapy. The call to action is also simple. The more people we can get listening to this podcast, the more people can start to think about their mental health differently and start to clean up some of those areas in their lives. That's exactly what psychotherapy is. We're not doing psychotherapy on the podcast. However, the theory about psychotherapy is that you got to go and be transformed overnight. That's not what it's about. It's over time, right? So over time, as you tune into this podcast, as you share it with others, as you connect in the comment section and with the overall anxiety and free podcast community, I want you to start thinking about the different areas of your life you could tweak. How can I transform myself in this area? If you're not getting up on time, what are some small tweaks you could make to do that? If you're not going to therapy consistently, what are some small tweaks you can make to make sure that you can start going to therapy more consistently with your therapist? I really appreciate your time today in watching and listening to this first episode. Hopefully, you got a good idea about what you can expect from the podcast. May 1st, we are launching season 1 of the Anxiety and Free podcast. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Don't forget to like, share, and continue tuning in because, honey, I want you to try therapy. Have an amazing day, everyone. The Anxiety and Free podcast is sponsored by Find My Therapist, connecting you with therapists at findmytherapist.us. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it. Tune in next week for more conversations on navigating mental health and finding your freedom.